ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, is a terrible illness. It's rare. Only about 5,000 people are diagnosed every year. But there's no cure and few treatments. Still, as Lee Cowan tells us, there may be a ray of hope.
You can be forgiven if you're a little jealous of Brian Wallach at first. He's good-looking, smart, a track and field athlete at Yale, a graduate of Georgetown Law. All in all, a pretty good catch, as they say.
What was it that struck you about Brian?
I mean, he's very cute. I was trying to impress him since the moment I met him.
That moment was in New Hampshire, when Sandra Abrevaya was working for the 2008 Obama presidential campaign. Brian was the political director for the state. It's a job he took instead of taking an offer from a big powerhouse law firm.
It was literally our job to work together.
Or just the three of us, just in case.
Eventually, they both became staffers in the Obama White House.
You embark on a new journey together.
They married in 2013.
Share in the ups and downs of life together.
Moved to Chicago and started a family.
Should we go back? Come here.
But a few years later, their charmed life took a turn.
Good job.
While working as an assistant U.S. attorney in Chicago, Brian went to the doctor about a simple cough. But it was much more than that.
There's so much I want to do and say, and the disease makes it hard to do.
He was eventually diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's already nearly robbed him of his ability to walk and his ability to speak.
So there was more going on than just the cough.
Yeah.
But you hadn't even told her?
No.
I had no idea.
There were other things bothering Brian that he had kept to himself, thinking they were probably nothing to worry about.
My muscles were twitching.
You can see that the muscles are just pulsating.
I also had weakness in my left hand.
That's how ALS works. It kills the nerves that move muscles. The average lifespan is only 2 to 5 years. Brian didn't know much about ALS when he was diagnosed, but he did know the legend of Lou Gehrig, the New York Yankee who bid goodbye to his fans after he, too, was diagnosed with ALS.
I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
Gehrig made that speech on July 4th, 1939, and he was dead less than 2 years later. Time became Brian's most pressing question for his doctor.
And then I think you have about 6 months or so.
And how do you even process something like that?
And then
Brian was only 36. He and Sandra had a 2-year-old and a newborn just home from the hospital.
We started crying on the floor of our living room, and then Brian said, "We have to go to the Verizon store." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" "We need to get more memory on my iPhone because if I die, I don't want the girls to forget who I am."
That was one of your first thoughts. Brian did beat the odds. He's almost 4 years into his diagnosis, but its cruelty is so plainly evident. Despite the decline, though, he and Sandra are determined to fight the disease, the same way they fought a winning political campaign.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today.
For the last 2.5 years, he and Sandra have been crisscrossing the halls of Congress. That's Brian testifying before Congress in 2019.
I'm here to ask you to see us, to hear us.
And this is him testifying just this past May.
the question now is how quickly we can end ALS.
The vehicle they're using to bring about change is their organization, Am ALS.
Let me get everyone on.
Thank you.
They are tireless, working every day, usually from the ALS war room upstairs in their home. Their goal is to give patients the power to make change, to give them a voice in their own care, and help them gain access to therapies that they might not otherwise get.
When you are a patient and you are driving the advocacy agenda,
and you're running out of time,
you push hard and you do work differently.
Since it was started, Am ALS says it's helped increase federal funding for research by $83 million. The infusion of money has helped launch dozens of clinical trials for promising new therapies. So far, there have only been 2 drugs that have been approved by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, to treat ALS. But science is perhaps closer today than ever before to a possible breakthrough.
For the first time ever, there are a host of drugs in the pipeline that are showing really promising results.
And yet, you can't get access.
And yet we can't get access.
So what's the holdup?
FDA is afraid of getting it wrong.
I'm going to start with the big ones.
The FDA's job, in part, is to make sure therapies are safe and effective. But letting patients accept the risks for themselves is the kind of flexible regulation that Brian and Sandra are begging the FDA to grant to the ALS community.
We understand the amount of work when we are facing a disease that is 100% fatal. So we are willing to take those risks.
One experimental therapy shows particular promise for ALS patients. It's something called AMX0035, made by Amyotrophic Pharmaceuticals.
That therapy showed in clinical trial studies that it extended life by 6.5 months, which when you have a prognosis of 2 to 5 years,
Or like in Brian's case, 6 months.
that's living twice as long.
Canadian and European regulatory agencies are edging ever closer to approving that drug, but in this country, the FDA wants more time to study it.
The extra study is going to take 4 to 5 years. By then, pretty much every ALS patient alive today will be dead. How can you look people in the face and tell them that that's acceptable?
There is legislation pending that could help, allowing people to get potentially life-saving drugs before they're fully approved by the FDA. But the wheels of government sometimes need a push.
The HIV community faced the same battles when they needed accelerated therapies. It took people who didn't have HIV caring and letting government know that it is unconscionable to deny therapies to dying people.
The most promising experimental ALS treatment so far is something called tofersen from Biogen. It appears to slow the progression for a very rare form of ALS.
I coach sports. I play sports. I work every day.
Chris Snow got access to tofersen through a clinical trial. It's given via a spinal injection every 4 weeks.
I don't necessarily feel like myself or look like myself, and I act like myself.
Now, it only targets a particularly aggressive form of ALS, but it's just that also took the lives of Chris's father, 2 uncles, and his 28-year-old cousin. At the time he started on the new drug, he was given less than a year to live. That was almost 2 years ago.
He should be dead. That's the simplest way to put it. He looks pretty good for a dead person.
She says that too.
His wife, Kelsey, watched Chris get back on the ice and play hockey. He's the assistant general manager for the Calgary Flames. And he's still able to keep up with their 2 young children.
The quality of life that this has given us is really a miracle.
Tofersen hasn't completely halted ALS. Chris has still seen changes in his facial muscles. He can't really smile anymore, and he has trouble speaking and trouble swallowing. But many of his other symptoms have indeed slowed.
I don't think I'm dying. My fear is, can I play hockey with my son next winter? Instead, will my son have a dad next winter?
That's him teeing off for a round of golf just last month. And, yep, he played all 18 holes. He posts those kind of achievements regularly. Kelsey has a blog of her own about living with ALS.
I'm offering up our family. And so if you can see and care about my family and that makes you care about this cause, that's what I'm going for.
For all its promise, tofersen, though, won't help Brian's form of ALS, which in some ways makes his efforts all the more remarkable. His ability to still keep his humor while fighting for what at times seems like an insurmountable battle is really courage of a different sort.
You don't see this. People with this disease disappear into their homes, and there are simply not enough of them for the world to say.
Brian has inked his commitment to curing ALS right on his arm with a tattoo. ALS YG. The YG means you gone.
This takes a lot of effort.
Yes.
And it takes an awful lot of time. And you don't have a lot of either, really.
I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I'm sure that if it is the last day for me, I want to look back on my life and say I tried, and I hopefully made a difference